As we discussed in an earlier episode, coin money seems to have developed nearly simultaneously around 600 BCE in Anatolia, India, and China. It then spread quickly to other parts of Eurasia and Africa. Why then did the Chinese develop paper money so much earlier than the rest of the world? This is the butterfly's wing, where we look at seemingly small things with unexpectedly large impacts. Much of the reason has to do with the type of metal the Chinese used to mint their coins. While other civilizations largely used rare, precious metals like gold or silver as a basis for their coinage systems, the Chinese were much more likely to use common, base metals, such as copper, bronze, iron, or lead. Chinese governments tended to have relatively high levels of authority, so they had an easier time enforcing the use of less valuable base metals as money. The result was a Chinese coinage system with significantly higher quantities of coins, circulating overall and being used in individual transactions, compared to European, African, Middle Eastern, or Indian systems. But using common base metals for coins didn't necessarily mean Chinese governments were always able to produce enough coins to support their economies. During the Tang Dynasty, both internal and external trade expanded. Emperor Daizong also required peasants to pay a portion of their taxes in coin. Previously, they paid with a combination of labor, silk, or linen, and grain. Expanded trade and the requirement to pay taxes in coin created new demand for coin, demand which imperial mints couldn't adequately meet, so a coin shortage resulted. In a move similar to the mercantilist policies European governments would adopt much later, Emperor Shizong's administration responded to the lack of coinage by requiring most transactions in provincial markets to be conducted using commodities such as silk as a means of exchange, rather than coins. The government also restricted the flow of coins between provinces. These policies caused coins to become concentrated in the capital, while in the provinces, coins became even more scarce. These conditions created pressures on merchants conducting the bustling trade in tea and other goods between the wealthy capital and the provinces to create some form of financial innovation. So they developed so-called flying cash, or feiqian, paper promissory notes that could be used as a substitute for physical coins. These notes were originally issued by private trading houses, which came to function as transfer banks. A merchant would deposit coins he'd earned in the capital at a trading house in the capital. The trading house would then give the merchant a feiqian promissory note for the amount deposited, and would send a copy of this flying cash to a branch office at the merchant's intended destination. Once the merchant had returned to his home province, he could exchange his copy of the promissory note at a branch office for the amount of cash deposited in the capital, minus a fee. The branch office would verify the note was genuine by comparing it to the copy sent directly by the office in the capital. This arrangement worked well for merchants, who no longer had to transport large quantities of heavy copper coins back and forth between the provinces and the capital, which also would have exposed them to risk of theft. Trading houses benefited by being able to charge a fee for the service, and the arrangement worked well with the government's policy of keeping as much coin in the capital as possible. Later, government offices began issuing their own flying cash. Flying cash notes probably didn't circulate in the marketplace as money very often, if at all. Instead, they mainly functioned as an early form of traveler's checks, but they were an important precursor to paper money. This innovation was also made possible by the Chinese invention of paper. During the Song Dynasty, the province of Sichuan on China's western border was required to use iron coins to prevent the more valuable copper coins used elsewhere in China from exporting out of the country. While copper was more common than either gold or silver, iron was even more common than copper, meaning the residents of Sichuan needed to use even higher quantities of iron coins for everyday transactions, compared to what would have been required with a copper-based system. It was not unheard of for people to carry multiple kilograms worth of coins on shopping trips. Just as earlier merchants had found it worth paying a fee to use flying cash notes to avoid transporting large quantities of copper coins, there was now demand for something similar to facilitate more routine transactions happening with iron coins in Sichuan. So merchants invented Jiaozi promissory notes. A merchant would issue one of these notes to someone in exchange for a deposit of coins. The merchant would then agree to exchange this note at a later date to whomever presented it for the amount of coins deposited, minus a fee. At first, Jiaozi notes were issued for whatever amount had initially been deposited, usually fairly large amounts. Some early Jiaozi notes could be worth the equivalent of 25 kilograms worth of iron coins. But later, merchants began issuing notes for standard denominations and smaller amounts, which made it easier for these notes to circulate in the marketplace. Unlike flying cash notes that were used primarily to facilitate the transfer of large quantities of money over long distances, Jiaozi notes really did circulate as money on a regular basis. In 993 CE, when rebels shut down Sichuan's mint, preventing the issuance of new iron coins, the use of Jiaozi notes proliferated to help fill the gap in the available money supply. In time, merchants who used Jiaozi notes realized the large quantities of coins they were storing would go mostly unredeemed while their notes circulated in the marketplace. This led some merchants to maintain inadequate reserves of coin to back their notes, meaning they sometimes ran out of coins when people tried to cash in their notes, leading some merchants to go bankrupt. So in the year 1005, government officials in Sichuan began regulating Jiaozi notes, allowing only 16 trusted merchant houses to issue the notes. In 1023, the local government began issuing the notes directly, beginning the long-standing practice of governments issuing paper money. The government later began paying its soldiers directly with Jiaozi notes, which greatly expanded the use of paper money throughout the economy. Jiaozi notes helped facilitate commerce and government finance in China, though there were periodic problems with inflation whenever too many bills were issued. Inflation with paper money became a particularly acute problem toward the end of the northern Jin Dynasty, which ruled northern China beginning in 1115. In the early 1200s, when the Mongols under Genghis Khan invaded the northern Jin, the Jin printed large amounts of paper currency in an attempt to finance their defense. But this was ultimately unsuccessful, resulted in inflation, and ultimately failed to stop the Mongol conquest of Jin territory. While the Mongols were foreign to China, they were quick to adopt many Chinese customs and practices. As a nomadic people, they found transporting lightweight paper money to be a great improvement over heavy coin money. They therefore adopted the Chinese practice of issuing paper money. In 1260, Genghis Khan's grandson, Kublai Khan, issued a new paper currency called the Inaugural Treasure Exchange Voucher. This currency was denominated in units of bronze coin, but could only be redeemed for silver. Unlike previous Chinese issues of paper money, which mainly circulated only within specific regions and alongside base metal coins, Kublai wanted his money to replace base metal coins and to be accepted across his growing empire. He therefore banned the use of bronze coins in exchange. In 1276, when Kublai defeated the southern Tang Dynasty at the Battle of Yamen, completing the Mongol conquest of southern China, his administration greatly increased the supply of paper money and allowed the citizens of the Song to exchange Song paper money for inaugural treasure exchange vouchers at a rate of 50 to 1. Kublai's paper money soon circulated as the predominant form of money throughout both northern and southern China, something no previous paper currency had achieved. But this vast new issue of paper money, intended in large part to support the economic activity of over 60 million conquered Song citizens, outstripped the supply of Kublai's silver reserves. So in 1282, Kublai adopted policies that essentially halted the convertibility of inaugural treasure exchange vouchers into silver. But the end of convertibility into silver caused the currency to depreciate. To deal with this inflation, in 1287, Kublai's administration officially devalued the existing paper money by issuing a new paper currency. This new Zhiyuan Chao currency replaced the old currency at an exchange rate of 5 to 1. devaluating the old money by 80%. This action, replacing a depreciated paper currency with a new paper currency, would be repeated by many later governments to deal with their own serious bouts of inflation. Kublai declared the Zhiyuan Chao to be a fiat currency, a money backed only by government mandate, and not by any underlying commodity. China under Kublai Khan marks the first time in world history that a paper fiat currency was used on such a wide scale. It was during this period that the Venetian Marco Polo visited China and brought word of Chinese paper money to Europeans. The Zhiyuan Chao and later issues of Chinese paper money, some of which were convertible to coin and some of which were fiat currencies, continued to face periodic problems with inflation, but worked well enough to continue to be used until 1450 during the Ming Dynasty. The third Ming emperor, Zhu Di, racked up sizable debts in the early 1400s, building the Forbidden City Palace at the new Chinese capital of Beijing, repairing the Grand Canal, funding maritime explorations under Admiral Zhen He, and in military conflict with the Mongols. In 1450, after the inevitable inflation, the Ming stopped the practice of issuing paper money. It would not be until modern times that the Chinese would again issue fiat paper money on a wide scale. So what are we to make of the Chinese experiment with paper money? Was it a success? A failure? It seems unfair to call the experiment either a total success or a total failure. It's true that Chinese paper money suffered frequent bouts of inflation, and that inflated paper money may have contributed to the collapse of the Song, the Northern Jin, the Mongol Yuan Dynasty, and a near collapse of the Ming. But paper money, in one form or another, also helped finance these governments for half a millennia, a period of time when the Chinese greatly expanded their population, living standards, and trade. In a future episode, we'll turn to the West to study how Europeans reinvented banking, setting the whole world on a course toward the adoption of fiat paper money. Thanks for watching. Washington's troops, who were stationed in Newport, Rhode Island, preparing for an assault on New York City that would never come, were dangerously near the point of mutiny. The general feared they would not make the long march to Yorktown unless they were first paid with hard coin. None of the numerous forms of paper money circulating at the time would do. It fell to Congress's Superintendent of Finance, Robert Morris, who had developed a strong working relationship with Washington to obtain the specie required. Morris negotiated with DeGrasse for a short-term loan of $20,000 worth of coin carried by the French fleet. He then obtained another $6,000 from various other sources, relying in part on his personal credit. This money was then distributed to the troops who would fight the Yorktown campaign. It was the first time any of them had been paid in coin for their services to the army. By October 1781, a Franco-American force of 20,000 men succeeded in surrounding and defeating Cornwallis's forces at Yorktown. It was the second and final time during the Revolution that an entire British army surrendered. When British Prime Minister Lord North heard of Cornwallis's surrender, he exclaimed, "Oh God, it's all over." But it was not over, and would not truly be over for another 2 years. While the British Parliament